and welcome back to the Ghoul Guide Association, the show where we talk about all things Gothic and pop culture. We are, of course, your Ghoul Guides. I'm Lauren.
And I'm Mary.
And today we are doing another review / what to read recommendations episode, all about Wednesday Season 2 on Netflix, which a lot of you, I am assuming, have probably already seen because these are bingeable TV shows, and this is the Ghoul Guide Association, and Wednesday is a Tim Burton show, and I feel like the Venn diagram is probably somewhat of a circle. So Netflix recently released the first 4 episodes of the second season. Quite a considerable amount of time since the first season came out. So the first season came out in late, I want to say 2022.
It's been about 3 years.
It's been about 3 years, which is noticeable within the teenage cast.
Yeah.
Pugsley, for example, is much taller than he was in the first season, and we're supposed to think that only a summer has passed. So it does need to be a bit of a suspension of disbelief. But they released the first 4 episodes. The next 4 episodes will drop in September. And I thought this was a good one to do a little bit of a chat about the show and what to read if you enjoyed it, what to read if you didn't enjoy it, and what to read if you're hunkering for something along similar lines or same but different. So to start with, Mary, have you watched Wednesday?
I haven't watched this series. I'm really bad at watching series when there's just one season or when, I like it when things finish and then I can watch everything. So yes. I guess I have been waiting until this is done before I watch it. But I have seen, obviously, you can't get over.
You can't miss it.
You can't miss all the promo stuff. So, I mean, it looks gorgeous.
Yes. So I watched the first season, and I'm happy to be vulnerable on the pod. I watched the first season after me and my ex broke up, and as Mary remembers, my life was not in a good place, and I binged a lot of television. And I was like, oh, Wednesday. I'd seen people talking about it. I like the Addams Family. It's Tim Burton. It looks spooky. Jenna Ortega was in it. Catherine Zeta-Jones was in it. I watched it. My feelings about Wednesday is very much that it's a Tim Burton show. And I'm a basic spooky bitch. I love Tim Burton. And the thing about a Tim Burton for me is it's often style over substance. Tim Burton works best in things like The Melancholy Death of Oyster Boy, where it's these small little concept moments and it kind of hinges around the weirdness of the moment. I think probably the only exception is Edward Scissorhands. I don't count The Nightmare Before Christmas because as far as I'm concerned, that's a Henry Selick film, despite the fact that that is, as you know, Mary, one of my favorite films. But that's very much how I feel about Wednesday. I wouldn't necessarily say about Wednesday season 1 or season 2 so far, oh my God, it's so amazing, you need to watch it. It's such a great Gothic show. But as a visual medium of entertainment, thoroughly enjoyable, very entertaining. It looks great. It's very stylistic. I think Jenna Ortega is brilliant. I really like Catherine Zeta-Jones as Morticia. I know some people haven't liked her so much, but I really like her. I really like that she's aging very naturally, that she's still Catherine Zeta-Jones, she's great. But season 2 has been catching a little bit of flack for having a little bit of maybe not great characterization, a little bit of plot holiness from the first season. And some people are feeling like the characters aren't necessarily acting as they did. So if you've not somehow been wrapped up in the Wednesday media storm of the last kind of 6 weeks, Wednesday is a show about Wednesday Addams, the eldest daughter of the infamous Addams Family, which started as a cartoon, then became a sitcom, then became a series of films. There's been animated films, famously in the 90s, the ones with Christina Ricci as Wednesday, which I think is our generation's Wednesday. I love those films so much. They are iconic.
I really love, I can't remember which one it is, but it is the Christina Ricci Addams Family films. One of them stars a young Mercedes McNabb, And if you don't know who Mercedes McNabb is, for all you Buffy fans out there, you probably do. But she is a character in Buffy, one of Cordelia's friends, who then goes on to become a vampire and then stars in Angel. But yeah, if you want to see her like young Mercedes McNabb, then check out
I think it's
90s.
the second one when they go to the summer camp, isn't it?
It is the summer
Addams
camp
Family
one, yeah.
Values.
Yes, and I love
which
that
I think
one.
is also the one. Is that the one with Joan Cusack, or is that the first one?
I don't remember, but
my favourite is like the woman who marries Fester, and she's like a pink Barbie, and it turns out she's like an insane bloody boiler, and she actually just fits so well with the Addams Family.
Yeah, I think that's maybe the first one that they did,
and then the first one, maybe.
Yeah, but
yeah, great films.
It's
was a cartoon series.
It's an iconic family. It's an iconic family.
Yes.
They're so like, I mean, you were talking about like the Tim Burton style, but there is also that kind of like Gothic-y, campy style that I think all kind of iterations of the Addams Family capture, where it is Gothic in a joyful, macabre way. Yeah.
And that was kind of the point. So the original Addams Family comic strip, the films, the cartoons, the whole point of the Addams Family is that in the era of the nuclear family, so they start sort of I think they start around the 50s and 60s, but essentially the joke was that the Addams Family love each other, that the Addams Family, you know, they like Wednesday hooks Pugsley up to an electroshock therapy machine, and they eat bugs, and they're weird, and they live in a dark, creepy mansion, and they have a like Frankenstein's creature butler and a disembodied hand who's a former criminal called Thing. But the whole point of the Addams Family was that they were the most functional family in the fact that they love each other so much. Like, they are a family who really, really love each other. And obviously being in contrast to, you know, the mum who's taking benzos to make it through the day and chain smoking, and the kids who are on Adderall, and the dad who's cheating. You know, think about like the first season of Mad Men. The whole point of the Addams Family is that while they look super creepy and dark and weird, they're actually this really loving, lovely, joyful family.
Amazing how almost revolutionary it is to have an older couple where the husband is so in love with his wife and so like in lust with, but in a love. It comes from, you know, there's so much passion there, and I think that it's you often get so many, especially like family dramas or films where the parents are either they've kind of aged out of that, or there is a kind of loveless part of their relationship, or they are just separated and you know that for whatever reason. So this, I think, like again, like any iteration of the Addams Family, that is such a central point of it.
So one of the criticisms has been levelled at Wednesday, and I actually feel very much of two minds about this, is that one of the central conceits of the show is that Wednesday Addams, played by Jenna Ortega, I think brilliantly, is a malcontent even within the Addams Family. That she, you know, is like, she's this aspiring novelist, and part of the thing is that this Wednesday is sort of designed to be poking fun at teenage girls who take themselves very seriously in a loving way. I feel very seen in the Wednesday character in this iteration, you know, like I do feel like this is a very real Wednesday for our generation that grew up loving the Addams Family as a sort of like being, you know, the emo kid or the alternative kid. But essentially the plot of the first season is Wednesday releases piranhas in the swimming pool against a swim team who have bullied her little brother Pugsley. And her parents are like, we just don't know what to do with you anymore. We're going to send you to the Nevermore Academy, which is where we went to school. And the idea in this version of the Addams Family is that there is something called outcasts, and outcasts are sirens, vampires, shapeshifters, werewolves, psychics, Medusas. You know, they're essentially people that have all these different powers. So Nevermore is an academy for weirdos. And the joke is that when Wednesday gets there, the weirdos, she is the weirdo amongst the weirdo. You know, like she rooms with like a rainbow colored werewolf called Enid. You know, there's a clique. Like, it's very much still the kind of classic boarding, you know, outsider goes to boarding school kind of tale. Some of the criticism has been essentially that one of Wednesday's main kind of character moments is that she doesn't get on with her mother, and that she's resisting her mother. She's resisting her mother's interference. I don't think it's ever implied by the show that Wednesday doesn't deeply love her mother. She doesn't hate her mother. She doesn't resent her mother necessarily, but she wants to be separate from her mother. She wants to be like her own entity. And it's still the same Gomez and Morticia. They love each other very passionately. Uncle Fester is there. You know, they are still the Addams family, but some people have kind of said that having a Wednesday who isn't like, you know, enamored of her mother is a not very accurate representation. But we've never had a fully teenage Wednesday. Wednesday traditionally is about 12 and Pugsley is about 10. And I actually, when I sat down to watch season 1, was like, this feels like a very real character journey for Wednesday. And that's the thing that I really enjoyed about season 1. I enjoy that it doesn't take itself seriously. It's very camp. It's very silly. It does that thing where like plot holes, like just roll with it. And I personally really enjoy that. It's very over the top. Like, the twists are so ridiculous. And I loved that about season 1. Season 2, I'm not too sure where it's going. It leaves it on a cliffhanger. You have Christina Ricci back again. So she's in the first and the second season. This season, you also have Billie Piper. And as a British millennial, I freaking love me some Billie Piper. Billie Piper is in it as the music teacher. She's kind of like a mysterious piano prodigy who disappeared from the public eye. You have Steve Buscemi playing the new Prime Minister, head teacher.
Yeah.
So you have a really great cast of characters. Pugsley is now at Nevermore Academy. I kind of watched the first 4 episodes and just enjoyed myself. I didn't think about it very deeply. When I saw people talking about like the plot holes and the character development, I was like, oh yeah, that's probably true. But I think my review so far of Wednesday season 2 is, don't go in expecting a deep Gothic masterpiece, but go in and expecting something that is going to be visually entertaining, that is going to make you giggle, that is going to fill that spot of like wholesome entertainment that's not twee. And I think that's something, for me, the important thing about Wednesday is that it's not cringe. Because a lot of like wholesome entertainment verges into the cringe, and I struggle with that. I struggle with anything that gets a bit too twee and a bit too cringe, like a bit too saturine, like it makes me wince and I'm a bit like, oh. I think that's why you and I enjoy reality TV so much, because even when it's cringe, it's very real. Sometimes it's very cringe. But I think for me, the main thing about Wednesday is it's not cringy. Because it's Gothic, so the campness is so much at the part of it and the heart of it. Like, Fester, not the best Fester ever, but a good Fester. Like him, one of the things is that Wednesday enlists him to help her get some information from the local, essentially a mental asylum. So he checks into this cute little B&B and starts causing a ruckus, and then obviously gets himself institutionalized, and he has this like romance with one of the lunch ladies. It's all just very silly, but in that way that something like the Addams Family being so Gothic, it can be really silly without it feeling cringy or over the top or jumping the shark. So for me, if you want something that's a bit dark academia, a bit gothic, but it's just fun. It's lighthearted. It has got the twists and turns. It has got the spookiness to it. I think it's really filling a gap that we kind of have lost from not having shows like Buffy or Charmed. I don't want to necessarily say it's like those shows, but that kind of enjoyment that we got from that kind of show.
So very watchable then, you would say. Yeah, because I think it's also interesting, especially now we're into this streaming era, whether that be watching things on a streaming platform or engaging with other content elsewhere. I think, you know, the traditional, you do a TV series for 22 episodes.
Yeah.
And you would have it, and it would start in the autumn, and then it would finish around the summer. Like,
and you'd have your midsummer break, and it would always have a mid-season cliffhanger.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that streaming platforms are playing around with different kinds of formats like that.
Yeah.
Where, so I know, like, it's not a Gothic show, but like The Boys, they dropped like 2 or 3 episodes, but then it would be like 1 episode a week, and it's like, isn't this just like TV? And I think Stranger Things did this, and obviously now Wednesday have done this, where you'd have like different parts. I mean, I'm not sure, especially if you're waiting 3 years for you know, season. That seems strange to me.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know. Maybe that's just where we're going in terms of TV. And I think,
it's really interesting.
It's something that you can watch of a weekend, you know.
And I do think having, say, 4 episodes, that's like a healthy binge. You can watch that in a weekend or in an evening if you've got nothing on. Like, I think the first season of Wednesday was enjoyable for me because I binged it.
Yeah.
I do think it's one of those where if I was waiting every week for Wednesday, it might not work in the way that something like Buffy worked. But that's because it's shorter seasons as well. What I do think is working well with Wednesday is it has that kind of family show element that we struggle with, I think, at the moment, that it's grown up enough that me as a 35-year-old woman can watch it and enjoy it. But I could also see like a 14-year-old enjoying it. And I think in the way that something like Charmed or, you know, like just all of those shows that feel Charmed, Gilmore Girls, like there was this era of shows in the late 90s and the early 2000s where you could like watch it with your parents and that was fine. Like you all were taking something out of it. And I feel like Wednesday has a nostalgia that is more the form. It's not just the fact that the Addams Family is nostalgic. It's also like the type of show that it is. So yeah, I would say Wednesday is like a solid 3 out of 5 show for me. It's enjoyable. I am looking forward to the next part of the season coming out, but I'm not overly invested in it. I don't feel like it can necessarily disappoint me because I'm not expecting huge amounts from it. And I do think that's why I maybe am enjoying it more than other like viewers, but highly enjoyable, really watchable, and it's just beautiful. This is the thing about Tim Burton, right? Let's just like briefly talk about the Tim Burton of it all. I am a basic spooky bitch, like I said. I just really fucking love a Tim Burton aesthetic. I know he's by far and away not the most perfect creator. He's not even the most original. Like, he's basically a rip-off of Edward Gorey, but there's just something about a Tim Burton production that is always going to be fulfilling because he has that eye for weirdness.
Yeah, and he really celebrates weirdness. So I was telling you, like, before, I recently went to the Tim Burton exhibition. I don't know if it's touring anywhere, but it was in London. And I think,
the Design Museum.
It's one thing that, like, really stands out is that, like, he has a very recognizable style, but even, like, you know, from his, like, like the sketches that he did as a teenager and like his early work, you can see there the shapes and like the monsters but the kind of the playful, weird and spooky. It's always been there in his work, and he brings it to everything that he does. So whether that's a Batman film or Frankenweenie animation and, you know, The Corpse Bride, or whether it's like live action stuff, you know, like Beetlejuice, and all of these things. There is this, it's an attention to detail, but there's also a specific kind of a joy in celebrating, a joy in celebrating the weird. And you can tell he enjoys creating, and also as someone, you know, me and Lauren, and also you, if you are watching or listening, you are, you know, into the weird and the spooky. And I think it's, you know, watching his stuff, whether it's just a kind of a piece of art or one of his films or TV shows, there is something that you get. It's a celebration of the weird.
Yeah. I mean, Tim Burton for me, I think, was how I came to understand that I liked the Gothic and the darkness and the spooky, but didn't necessarily like things like horror. Because, you know, I loved Nightmare Before Christmas as a kid. Absolutely loved it. Always was really obsessed with it. And when I was about, I think, 14, somebody bought me The Melancholy Death of Oyster Boy and other short stories, which, if you don't know, is this like illustrated book of sort of like, I think they're all in rhyme, aren't they? And it's very inspired by Edward Gorey. They're like children's stories. And someone bought me a lunchbox the next year. I had a metal lunchbox, like an old fashioned. They were really popular for a while, like those tin retro lunchboxes. And I took that to school. It clanked in my bag, like, but like I, again, was, you know, that was like a little symbol of like me being a little alternative queen at 15, like, you know, couldn't quite do the emo fringe because I've got a very severe cowlick, but I had a Tim Burton lunchbox and I wore Doc Martens, and that was a way that I was able to express myself. And I think there's just something about that he captures. And I think that's the thing about his version of the Addams Family and this version of Wednesday. She's kind of like it's a bit of a detective show, essentially. Like, she's always solving a mystery. And the kind of running joke is that the only person taking it seriously is Wednesday. And I actually think that that's really believable, because we all wanted to be Wednesday, and that's kind of what we were all like at 15.
Yeah.
Like, taking it a little bit too seriously. So when I first thought about what I could recommend, I was like, oh, actually, the obvious thing to do would be to recommend some YA. And I thought, I'm actually not going to do that because it's a while since I've read YA. And I also think that is you go into Waterstones at the moment and there's a lot of YA recommendations for Wednesday. So I thought maybe what would be better is if I do a sort of like vibes recommendation.
We like
of
vibes.
Like, you're a grown up, you've watched Wednesday, you want some reading, what to read. So my first recommendation is for a novella. So nice and quick. I didn't realize it was a novella when I picked it up. And I read it in the bath in one go. But very enjoyable. It's called The Graveyard Shift, and it's by M.L. Rio. So M.L. Rio first published their novel, I keep getting it wrong because there's another one with a similar title. I believe it's called If We Were Villains. Pre-pandemic, it didn't get a lot of traction. And then during the pandemic, when everybody was home and BookTok, the reading side of TikTok, started really taking off, people got really into dark academia, partially spurred on by Wednesday. And Donna Tartt's Secret History basically came blasting back into the top of the readership. And people rediscovered M.L. Rio's first novel. In that time, she'd done a PhD. She was working in universities. I think she worked in libraries. And she was inspired to write a new novella. And she's also got a novel coming out in October called Hot Wax. Graveyard Shift is about a group of people who meet every night in a churchyard at the back of a university that is implied to be a sort of like Harvard, Yale, New England University type town. You know, the university is where the money is. The rest of it's a bit dilapidated. They meet in this churchyard every night in the middle of the night to smoke. One of them is an insomniac. One of them is working night shifts at a hotel. One of them is the editor for the school paper. One of them works and is the manager of the local university bar. So it's like this group of people who have really nothing in common apart from the fact that they come together in this churchyard and they smoke. And it's like this little almost secret society. Really gives sort of like Breakfast Club, St. Elmo's Fire, like that 80s kind of vibe, which I really enjoyed. The central premise is, on one night, the characters arrive and there's a hole. A hole has been dug in their churchyard that was not there before. And they are fairly sure that they are the only people that come here. They've never seen anyone else. And there's a hole. A hole that looks suspiciously like a grave. Now, of course, it is, in fact, a graveyard. But this is a brand new hole. They're all stood around smoking. They theorize on what the hole might be. And as they are leaving, the very curious editor of the newspaper, she sticks around with one of the others to explore the church. She's never been inside the condemned church. And as they are doing this, they see somebody dragging something to the hole. And that essentially sparks this single night of investigation. And it follows this group of people hour by hour from sort of midnight to the early hours of the morning as they unravel this mystery behind who has dug this grave and what are they putting in this grave. It is very much kind of low-key, almost like B-movie, dark academia horror. So I don't want to spoil it because it is a novella. So it is, very quick and easy to read, but it really captures that kind of like something sinister is happening, but what is it? And what does it mean? And how does it affect this different group of people who are not friends, but so interconnected? It's very much, I've read a couple of these recently and I don't really have a name for it yet, but what I'm also kind of almost calling bystander horror, where you're not necessarily the final girl, you're not necessarily the person experiencing it, you're not necessarily following the perpetrator. People who are stumbling across something that would be the main plot of a horror movie. And it kind of leaves it very ambiguous. It's just like a really satisfying bite of a sandwich. Like when you get a canapé and you put the canapé in your mouth and you're like, that was really satisfying. Great flavors, great textures, like just enough to keep me going until the meal is served. That kind of novella. So if you really like the sort of creepiness, spookiness, dark academia, you don't want something too deep, you don't want something too intense, but you just want to scratch that itch that Wednesday and obviously the whole thing is about her investigating, and that's very much what happens in this novella. So if you're wanting like a little bit of something more, but maybe more of a university rather than a high school, because Nevermore is a high school, then The Graveyard Shift by M.L. Rio is what I would be recommending for you. And I think that you would like this one, Mary.
I was just going to say, like, it sounds so, like, obviously, love me a church and a graveyard. And
yep.
The whole, like, there's a single night and there's this mystery that unravels and that they have to kind of, like, I guess decide, are we going to investigate? And obviously the answer is always going to be yes.
Always,
yes. I have been burned by dark academia before, so I'm like,
so I was just gonna say, we have had this conversation about dark academia, and what's really interesting is in the copy that I have, which is the British edition of Graveyard Shift, there's an essay at the back by M.L. Rio, and she talks about being grandfathered into academic head-on, to a genre that she didn't know existed.
Yeah.
And she talks about the fact that dark academia is kind of something that didn't exist, that people have identified in these different texts and then started writing to, which is so Gothic in of itself.
That's often how genres start. It's people notice trends and then it's like, oh, okay, so all of these books are doing something similar. Let's group them together and then let's replicate that.
Yes. And I think what I've realized is I am enjoying the dark academic books that didn't realize they were dark academic books. And I think there's maybe a bit of, because this genre is developing, it's kind it makes me think of poor old Clara Reeve, who was like the kind of second big Gothic novelist, who was like, I'm going to write a Gothic novel, and everyone was like, ew, Clara, like, stop copying, like, what are you doing? This is cringe. And you know, it's very difficult to write into an emerging genre when the conventions haven't been quite set in stone, and what are you writing to? So I think if you enjoy the vibes of dark academia, but you've maybe been a bit burned by like it being fully set around the university, particularly for those of you that have done higher education like we have, maybe this would be one for you.
Yeah, I think for me, yeah, when I read a book that turned out to be dark academia, and I was just like, this is like all of the stress that I have just like been through myself, and I don't need it glorified, and I also don't want to spend lots of time reading about it. So the fact that this is like outside in a graveyard, yes, great. Like, I can do that.
And very much that is what I enjoyed so much about it, that it's on the periphery. Research is a central thing to this novella, but it's all about the periphery of the research and the people on the edges, essentially. I think this kind of like, this bystander horror thing, I'm really enjoying it, and I would definitely recommend Graveyard Shift. On the same theme of dark academia, if you are really enjoying the idea of dark academia, but you actually do want something with a bit of weight to it, and I mean that literally in the case of this book, because it is huge, and I dropped my copy in the bath because it is quite heavy, then I would like to recommend to you Babel, or Babel, depending on how you pronounce that, by R.F. Kuang, which is a novel that came out in, I believe, late 2021. And it is, the core concept of this novel is it is set in a historical fantasy version of Oxford. And the idea is that the School of Language is actually a magic school. Not in the sort of like, witchcraft and wizardry way, but the idea is that in the world of Babel, magic can be performed and summoned through language, and specifically the interconnections and interlinkings of language. R.F. Kuang, like M.L. Rio, is also an academic, and I do think that there is something about having been through that experience, particularly for R.F. Kuang, as I believe she's Asian American, but as, a multilingual person, as somebody who has that kind of dual culture understanding, because Babel, the main character of Babel is a young boy who, as he discovers, is half Chinese. He, as a small child, his family dies of plague, and he is collected by a rich white professor who turns out to be his biological father. And he is essentially trained in all these languages, and eventually he goes to join the School of Language, which is, they call it Babel, essentially. The whole novel is about language. It is about colonialism. It's set during the period of the Opium Wars and British colonization. The four main characters are essentially brought together because they are the outcasts from the academic society. So Robin, the main character, is half Chinese. There is another character who is Asian. I think he's Indian. There is a woman who is West Indian, and then a white woman. So essentially they are, the two girls have to dress as boys, and they're sort of like on the periphery. And the idea, of course, is that they are all very good at what they do, particularly the three non-white characters, because they are multilingual, because they are polyglots, because they are from these cultures, and they have all experienced colonialism, and they have all been the victims of colonialism. And part of that has forced them to be able to speak these different languages. Some people have criticized Kuang as being like, some people feel like she's too, like, smacked you in the face with it. I really don't feel that way. I've really enjoyed her work, but I think if you enjoy the sort of dark academia vibes of Wednesday, you enjoy the sort of like tension of like class and who you are and where that comes from, but you're really looking for something with some real weight to it, absolutely read Babel. It is such a unique novel, in my opinion. And potentially, I can't recommend it because it's not out in the UK yet, but her upcoming novel, Catabasis, which, Mary, is about 2 PhD students who follow their supervisor to hell because the supervisor dies before they can finish their theses.
I mean, I'm like, I want to read it, but also I don't. But no, Babel sounds...
I know, when I read the like blurb for Catabasis, I was like, I'm either gonna love this or be so scarred by it.
But yeah, Babel sounds great. And I mean, I've seen Babel, and I've also seen Graveyard Shift in bookshops, and I'm always like, I like pretty covers, and they always look really nice. But yeah, it sounds like it really captures that whole... I mean, a lot of the time weirdness is just a kind of an alternative way of saying different, and I think that it's nice that like there are things that also engage with that part of weirdness. And again, where you have it as a celebration of that difference, and like, you know, it's great actually. Like it shouldn't just be, all like we have all these
Babel
cultures,
is
but
very
that we can like how they, because I guess that's also the part of the magic, is that it's not just about like in like having these cultures, but how they interact and can influence and create magic with one another.
And I should say that Babel is quite sad, particularly towards the end. I mean, it is a novel about colonial violence, essentially. So I do feel like you kind of know from the beginning that there can be no happy ending, because it's set in like the late 19th century, very much like the height of the colonial era. But it is this really powerful consideration of how, you know, the English language was used as part of the colonial project, of how whiteness presents. And I thought it was a really also good interrogation of how difficult it is to love academia when we know academia is also the institution. And to love learning, and to love what academia and the physical, in this case, the physical space in which you do the learning, but then how exclusionary, you know, in this case, it is literally a tower, you know, how exclusionary the institution can also be. So yeah, if you like that aspect of Wednesday, or you like the fact it's about outcasts, but you want something a little bit more meaty and a little bit more serious, then head over to R.F. Kuang's Babel and maybe check out Catabasis. I will read that one and review it for you guys. If you enjoy the nostalgia and the magic and the teen angst of Wednesday, but as an adult kind of reflecting backwards, then I would like to recommend you Signal to Noise by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. No surprise there. Everyone knows by now how much I love this author. Signal to Noise is about 3 friends in the 80s who realize they can use music to make magic. And it's very like, it's got the kind of Heathers vibes. It's got the sort of like, you know, weirdo outcast 80s movies vibes. And essentially it is half the story of what happens at the time of their teenage years, when they start to discover this magic, how it impacts their friendship, how it impacts their identities, the way they fit in with their peers or don't fit in with their peers, the tension between kind of power and how you use that power. But the actual story starts with the main character returning to her childhood home and facing for the first time everything that happened when she was a teenager. So if you enjoy the nostalgia of Wednesday and it kind of invited you to reflect back on your teenage years and the beautiful, cringy teenage angst that we all kind of went through, particularly those of you that are probably listening to this, then I would highly recommend Signal to Noise. It is very much magical realism. I think, you know, Moreno Garcia does that really well. It's a very, very well done tradition in Latin American fiction anyway. But that 80s-ness of it. And I think if you enjoyed like Stranger Things, then Signal to Noise captures that same nostalgia that Wednesday does, but it has that kind of, it uses magic and music as the sort of weirdness and that struggle to fit in, and that struggle of defining ourselves, and also how our teenagers' experiences shape us as adults, and whether or not we want to go back or not, and that kind of like fulfillment of it all. It's a really great novel. It's a great novel about friendship, about legacy, about who we are, and about the struggles of being a teenager without being cringy in the same way that I felt like Wednesday did. Really enjoyable, particularly if you are a music fan. And I think especially if you liked things like The Craft, Heathers, Clueless, like any of those sort of like 80s, 90s movies, be they rom-com, be they, I know we talked about this a little bit with in this month's horror review, where we said like, you know, the rom-com teen movies and the slasher teen movies are kind of all in the same genre. Like, yeah. You know, they all have a very similar vibe. Signal to Noise, really readable, really enjoyable. Highly recommend if you're looking for that nostalgia aspect to it.
Excellent.
And the final one on my recommendation list is a novel by a Spanish author called Virginia Feito, who has just published a novel that's actually getting quite a lot of buzz called Victorian Psycho. I don't know if you've seen that one on the shelves anywhere, Mary.
I don't know, but I am intrigued.
Yes, I think I will be picking that one up. The novel that I would like to recommend is the slight curveball for this one. I always try and pick one that's like not too obvious for the thing. It's called Mrs. March. I don't know if you remember, I picked this up when we went to Dublin, really randomly. You know, that day when I like went for a walk and went to the bookshop, and I picked it up because I liked the cover.
So far, that has never let me down.
No, exactly. Yeah. It had this kind of retro housewifey cover, but you could tell just from the font and the colours that it was clearly like a bit weird. Mm-hmm. It's like, you look good. Mrs. March is about a woman who is a second wife. It's giving Rebecca vibes.
Yeah.
She's only ever referred to as Mrs. March, even when she's talking about her like younger years. She is married to an author. Her husband has just published his new novel to great acclaim. She's very excited. She's throwing a party and she's out doing her shopping, and somebody essentially asks her if she is the inspiration for the character in her husband's novel. And she is very offended by this because she is an Upper East Side housewife, and the character is a down and out sex worker. And she is mortified, and it basically sends her unraveling. Her sense of self unravels, her sense of her relationship unravels, her marriage unravels. And it's kind of like Shirley Jackson meets Mad Men meets maybe something like Mexican Gothic, actually. I had no idea what to expect from this going in because I literally just picked it up based on the cover. But I think if you like the sort of the way that Addams Family gothicizes reality, and in the way that the Addams Family joke is that they're super fucking weird, but actually they're really, really functional and they love each other. If you like the sort of flip of that the perfect looking family from the outside, you know, how that actually works on the inside, and the way that self and identity kind of like falls apart, then I would recommend Mrs. March. I really enjoyed this novel. It gave sort of like the vibe of something like American Psycho, where you're not 100% sure what's real and what's not, but it kind of fits that. It's not female rage, but it fits into that really like exciting genre that's growing at the moment of like a sort of reigniting of the Shirley Jackson era of kind of Gothic fiction of problematic female main characters in a way that is like just really satisfying.
Like a kind of psychological horror, like where it's about like family dynamics and relationships and what you can believe and who you can trust sometimes, I guess, maybe. That sounds fascinating.
It's weird, it's unsettling, there's some weird stuff with bugs in it. Again, all of these were really satisfying reads in that way of like, you know, you take a bite of a sandwich and you've got flavour, you've got texture, you got a bit of mustard on there. You're like, yes, this was satisfying.
Yeah.
So yes, that is my what to read. If you enjoyed Wednesday, if you're looking for something a bit different, looking for something a bit more, let us know what your thoughts were on the first 4 episodes. And who knows, we might come back when the second half comes out. Let's see where that goes. Let's see what they do with it. Maybe I could recommend some monster horror, because it seems like that might be something big in the second half. But of course, in the meantime, stay safe and stay spooky.
Stay safe and stay spooky.